This is a clip from my book. It's about my nephew, and it's a beautiful story. He passed away 12 years ago. Can't believe he's gone. Here we go.
Chapter 15. I fell in love on May 11th. It was May 11th, 1975. It was a beautiful day. It was Mother's Day. The most incredible thing happened to me on this day. I fell in love. I sure didn't see it coming, but I did. I moved to Drexel from Tampa, Florida, almost 2 years ago. A lot has happened in my life since then. My grandmother died a month after we got here. My sister Lynn got married to a long haired guy with tattoos named Danny Lyons. He's a nice guy. I like him. He also plays drums. I want to be a drummer someday. I got in trouble a lot because I would hit on the seat with my thighs when songs came on. I imagined I was a drummer already. Adults around me often holler, "Quiet! You're driving me crazy!" I would stop for a while. I'd start hitting again as the next song would come on. I couldn't help it. A few months ago, Danny, my sister's husband, showed me all his albums. He had over 200 albums. Most of them were rock and roll bands. This one band he played was called Led Zeppelin. Their drummer was so fantastic. I wanted to play just like them. The coolest album was Aerosmith, Toys in the Attic. I thought the toys on the album were out of this world. Seemed like every album he handed me, the band members all had long hair. I didn't understand why you'd had to have long hair to play rock and roll. It didn't make a bit of sense. That was because I was 8 years old. When I got older, I figured out that you definitely have to have long hair to play rock and roll. Danny's friends would come around the house to visit and listen to rock and roll. They all smoked little white cigarettes that they rolled. Danny and his friends were also thirsty and hungry. I didn't understand. It must have been that rock and roll music, I figured. So if I'm going to get big like them, I better listen to a lot of rock and roll music. The more I sat in there and listened to the rock and roll music, the hungrier and thirstier I got. It was working. I figured at this rate, I was going to be huge by my next birthday. I remember that my sister and her husband Danny lived with my mom and me. I got to listen to rock and roll every day. What is funny is, when I look back 45 years ago, my mom and dad went to church, but dad was not around a lot. Therefore, most of the time, it was mom and me. And sometimes my sisters would go to church with us. Sitting around with Dan and his friends, listening to rock and roll music every day was fun. Church will start about 7 p.m. My mom would holler for me, "It's time for church," at about 6 p.m. That meant I had to leave in about 15 minutes. I would brush my hair, wash my hands, and tell my rock and roll buddies goodbye. Then my mission was to grab something to drink and some chips if we had some, because that rock and rollin' made me hungry. After grabbing my goodies, I climbed into the back seat. I started thinking to myself, I wonder if I can talk Mom into taking me to Church's Chicken or McDonald's because I'm starving. Mom would get in the car and start telling me about her day. I thought my mom was the funniest lady I ever met. She always had me laughing, and then I'd get her laughing too, because I would come up with the craziest jokes. My mom used to think I was hilarious. This one particular night, we went to church in Fairborn, Ohio. Mom and I laughed all the way there. We were a little late, so we sat in the last row. I was happy, and I was sleepy. We listened to song service. It was great. I was really tired now. And the next thing I remember is my mom said, "Church is over. You got to get up." I couldn't believe it. She usually wouldn't let me sleep in church. That was a no-no. I had to find a water fountain, go to the bathroom, and tell Mom I would be right back. So I found the water fountain first because I was dying of thirst, then went to the bathroom. I felt like a new man. I headed back to Mom and see the pastor ahead of me, so I smile at him. And I go back to thinking about Church's Chicken, and out of nowhere, the pastor reached out to grab my hand, so I grabbed his hand. He held my hand and looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Young man, you've always got such a big smile. It must be the spirit of joy that lives inside you that makes you smile all the time. Your mom and dad are very lucky to have a boy like you that's so full of joy." I wanted to tell the preacher that he could put on some weight in just a few weeks if he started listening to rock and roll music. He could get that spirit of joy, like I've got, and be happy all the time too. I didn't, but I think I should have. I said, "Thank you, I appreciate that," and smiled. I went back to thinking about how I could get my mom to take me to Church's Chicken. That's really all I wanted to do. I was starving. Or should I say, I had the munchies. That's what the older guys say when they get hungry. Also, I couldn't wait to get home and tell Danny that the preacher told me I had the spirit of joy inside me, and he loved my big smile. When I told Danny and my sister, they both laughed. Danny started laughing even louder and looked at my sister. He said the preacher should have told him he had the spirit of Acapulco Gold. Or was it the skunk? My sister started laughing just as hard as Danny, so I laughed right along with them, even though I didn't know what they were really laughing about. It was funny enough to make them laugh, so I figured I better join in. My mom walked into the living room and said, "What's so funny in here?" My sister Lynn stopped laughing long enough to tell her what Danny said. My mom laughed briefly and looked at my sister and said, "You didn't forget you were pregnant, did you?" "No, I wouldn't do that, Mom. You guys can't do that stuff in the house in front of Harley. Take it outside. He's only 8 years old." On Mother's Day, Lynn said, "Danny will take me to the hospital. My stomach's been bothering me pretty badly this morning." My sister handed my mom a card and told her Happy Mother's Day. My mom said for her to go to the hospital and have that baby. That'd be the best Mother's Day gift ever. My first grandchild. My friend next door, Mike Davidson, asked me to go to the store. I said sure. I asked Mom for 25 cents if she had it. I gave Mom a hug, kiss, and told her I'd be right back. She said to be careful. I returned home safe after going to the store and stopping by a friend's house. Mom said that Lynn wasn't feeling well. Danny took her to the hospital. I asked Mom if I could play across the street at the Campbell's house. She said okay, but be back in 2 hours. I ran across the street to play with Michelle. She was cute and lovely too. Michelle had two little brothers. I wanted to play with her. I wasn't there long, and Mom hollered for me to come home. We were going to the hospital. My big sister might be having a baby today. I was so excited. I couldn't wait to see if it was a boy or a girl. Quite a few hours went by after we arrived. I got tired of waiting. I was bored. Finally, Danny came out and said, "It's a boy." I was going to be an uncle, and his name was going to be Tony Daniel Lyons. I couldn't wait to see him. I knew we would be best buds. I was going to have somebody to play with and listen to rock and roll with. It wasn't long, and Danny brought him out to show him off. He was beautiful. I couldn't wait to hold Tony and play with him. And play together we did. I got to go over all the time and see him, and hold and tickle him. The magic words to Tony were Tony Baloney. He would laugh so hard. He just thought that was so funny. I loved watching that little boy laugh. We definitely became best buds. I didn't know much about love. I do know one thing, that once that little boy came into my life, every time I got to see my little nephew, I knew my life had changed. I never felt that way about another person before. Just looking at those little hands and feet of this tiny human and his little smile just blew me away. I had no toys this cool and no toys that could ever touch my heart like he did. My little Tony Baloney was definitely my first love.